Good morning and salam sejahtera. Hello, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that all of you are keeping well and safe. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sophia, and I will be your host for Bersama Malaysia Summit over the next 3 days. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, allow me to go through some housekeeping for this session. Now, in case you have any questions during the sessions, feel free to post them in the Q&A chat box. Now, we will have some time at the end of each session for the speakers to address some of your questions. And of course, this summit will be recorded and will be available for rewatch on the Microsoft APAC YouTube channel. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Microsoft Malaysia, welcome to Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021, organized in partnership with Enfrasys, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and of course, Commvault. Now, the theme of the summit is empowering Malaysia's digital economy. And in case you must know, over the next 3-day summit, we have brought together industry experts and thought leaders to actually share all the interesting things that you should know about this industry that we'll be sharing with you right now, the insights, the strategies on how Malaysian public sector ministries and agencies can now leverage on the power of the cloud to support and accelerate growth in a safe and, of course, secure, compliant manner. Now, ladies and gentlemen, briefly, here's what you can expect throughout the summit. Today itself, we'll be looking at how to run hybrid and workloads, and of course, managing a hybrid workforce during COVID-19 and beyond. And tomorrow, we'll be sharing recommendations on how to prepare for a digital tomorrow by implementing backup and disaster recovery solutions on cloud, increasing organizational velocity through DevOps, and hear about what Power Apps can do for you and how you can better harness data to provide improved citizen experiences. And ladies and gentlemen, on day 3 itself, we'll be taking a deep dive into considerations, cloud security, and government's considerations on how you can administer a successful data classification strategy, build resilient operations, and to protect against modern day threats and implement the best practices in security. Now, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the 3 days, we'll be running quizzes and you will be given or receiving prizes by all of us. So do stay tuned. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you are ready. I hope that you are, because we have so much information to be shared with you this morning. To kick off our Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021, allow me to invite Mr. Sheikh Manzoor, General Manager of Public Sector Group in Microsoft Malaysia, and of course, Tengku Razmi Othman, Chief Executive Officer from Enfrasys Solutions. Mr. Sheikh and Tengku Razmi, the stage is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning to our distinguished guests, yang amat berhormat, Datuk-Datuk, fellow technical comrades, colleagues and our public servants, the ladies and gentlemen of Cloud Malaysia. I thank every one of you for being here with us today. We are delighted to be able to welcome everyone to this special 3-day event, fondly named the Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021. Hopefully, there's many more to come. I would like to welcome all the brilliant speakers and guests from our beautiful country. Thank you for being present here today to share your knowledge, wisdom, insights, and experiences on our cloud-first strategy, digital transformation, the impact on economy, and the livelihoods for all Malaysians and the world. I'll hand over to Tengku Razmi from Enfrasys.
Thank you, Sheikh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, Datuk-Datuk, fellow technology comrades, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, I'm very honored and thankful to be given this opportunity side by side with Microsoft and our other partners to say a few words on behalf of the team. The combination of Enfrasys, Microsoft, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and Commvault, we are a team going out into My Digital, helping some of our customers in the government space and also in the commercial space. We hope that together we'll be able and be ready to provide the best services to all our customers, especially in the public sector, thus helping transform and support our government in the My Digital initiative announced not too long ago. Before we proceed further, allow me to once again take a moment to share my appreciation to all of those who volunteered their valuable time to make this event a success. From the speakers that we have lined up for the next 3 days, that they will share their experiences, and also not forgetting the team behind the scenes, helping in making this conference a success. None of this would be possible today if it were not for all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, keluarga Malaysia. Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021 gathers industry thought leaders to discuss their perspectives and ideas on how public sector ministries and agencies would benefit from shifting to the cloud and accelerate the business while being safe and compliant. This is envisioned that our government's My Digital initiative is successful and that the plans to accelerate the Malaysia's progress as a technologically advanced economy become a reality in the near future. This will then chart the path to strategically position our beloved country as a competitive force in this new era. I believe My Digital is a crucial enabler in realizing our 12th Malaysia Plan, 2021 to 2025, as we work towards Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama 2030. To ensure that no Malaysian misses out on the digital revolution, now is the moment to build the groundwork for the country's transition into an advanced digital economy powerhouse. As we can see in the post-pandemic times, the Malaysian economy is bouncing back and on the rise following the trying times of COVID-19. Yet, the ongoing crisis, while we are on the road to recovery, it remains a concern that we must not ignore. Recovering to the pre-pandemic growth rates will require us to dig deep to reflect, accept more changes, and prepare to enhance not only the business climate, but the lives of our beloved rakyat and accelerate digitalization over time. Throughout this 3 days half-day event, among the topics that will be shared by Sophia earlier, it is my belief that most of it, not all, are genuine ways to improve operational resiliency and agility. It is topics like these that I sincerely hope will benefit our public sector and in turn benefit the rakyat. Also worth mentioning that we have prepared some topics for discussion, like managing a hybrid workforce during COVID-19 and beyond, and how this could empower our digital economy. To name some of our distinguished guest speakers and panelists, I would like to thank again Sheikh Manzoor, our GM Public Sector for Group Microsoft Malaysia, Sathish Balakrishnan, Senthil Prakash, Muhammad Arif, Richard Warner, Rahul Karya, Deepshikha Rana, Neil McLoughlin, and on day 2, we have K. Rahman, the Managing Director of Malaysia, and not forgetting Adrin Azli, Chief Digital Officer of Petronas, Muhammad Faizal Ahmad, Ko Elaine, Nohu Muhammad, Tamzi Rong, Hua Aik Chong, Head Digital Engineering of Petronas, Justin Yip, and on day 3, we have Dr. Jasmine Begum, Director of Legal, Corporate and Government Affairs, Microsoft ASEAN and New Markets, Fabian Vigar, CEO and Strategic Change Management Office, Economic Planning Unit of Prime Minister's Department, our Dr. Johar himself, our legend in the Microsoft industry and also in the IT world, Datuk TS Dr. Haji Amiruddin Abdul Wahab, CEO Cybersecurity, Mr. Bei Johar, our Group Chief Executive Officer of Enfrasys Group, Abbas Kudrati, and Minoru Hanamura, Chief Security Advisor, Microsoft Corp. I hope you all of us here today will be able to enjoy this 3-day event and gain tremendous value from the sharing sessions. I sincerely believe this would be beneficial to the Malaysian ministries and agencies in terms of improving productivity, efficiency, and proficiency. Before I end my speech, once again, I want to thank all of you for coming and congratulations also to those who contribute to making this event come true today. I'm confident and believe that all the efforts and cooperation shown here will have a huge impact on the development of digital economy for our country in the future. Without taking any more of your time, let's get this event started and hope everyone enjoys it. Don't forget all the questions and quizzes. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a good Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021, Empowering Malaysia Economy event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sheikh and Tengku Rasmi, for the energizing start. I hope that gave you an idea what to expect from the Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for our next session, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Sathish Balakrishnan, APAC GBB Senior Specialist from Microsoft, Mr. Senthil Prakash, Hybrid Cloud Lead from APAC Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and Encik Muhammad Arif Johar, Solution Engineer from Enfrasys, who will be sharing with us on the benefits from cloud and how you can still be compliant with regulation. I will hand over the session to the team right now. Over to you.
Hi, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining me for today's session. My name is Sathish. I'm a Azure Hybrid Specialist with Microsoft. Hope you are able to hear me okay. Great. So I'm here to talk about Azure Hybrid and some of the benefits we can drive through our hybrid solutions as well as multi-cloud solutions. This is specifically very, very relevant to your regulatory and compliance related workloads, especially the workloads that cannot move to the public domain, right? Can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So in the top of the chart, you see Azure Public Cloud. I'm sure this is very, very familiar to many of you. We also see many of our customers rapidly innovating with Azure Public Cloud as the underlying platform. But what is also equally true is many of your workloads cannot move to the public cloud, right? This is largely due to network latency reasons, compliance reasons, security reasons, regulatory reasons. For those workloads, within Microsoft, we chose to bring Azure services into your data centers. Now, within Microsoft, we believe hybrid cloud and multi-cloud is the reality today. Towards that, we are making significant investments to bring Azure innovations into your hybrid cloud as well as multi-cloud environments, right? When I talk about multi-cloud, I'm actually referring to AWS and Google type of public cloud offerings, right? When we talk about Azure Hybrid and Azure Multi-Cloud, for us, it is all about bringing Azure innovations into your on-premises data centers, edge locations, as well as your multi-cloud environments. So I'm going to provide more background and more details in some of the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So now, if you look at the bottom of this chart, globally we have more than 69 Azure regions. And very recently, we announced our intention to have a local Azure data center in Malaysia as well. I'm sure many of you are excited about it. What is also equally true, we are also making significant investments in bringing Azure into your data centers as well as multi-cloud environments. Now, the way we are doing is through Azure Arc, which is our central control plane. Now, what Azure Arc does is that it can seamlessly extend Azure control plane as well as several of Azure services into your on-premises environment. So in this slide, you see Azure application services as well as data services. And what you also see is Azure Kubernetes service, which is one of the fastest growing public cloud service for us, for Microsoft. And we are bringing the exact same Kubernetes experiences into on-premises as well through our on-premises infrastructure offering called Azure Stack HCI. So towards the end of this session, I'm going to get into some more details about Azure Stack HCI. And one of the other area that I wanted to touch upon is the Azure security services and Azure governance capabilities that we can now bring into your on-premises as well as multi-cloud environments. And we can also enable GitOps-based automation. If you're looking for secure DevOps into your on-premises or multi-cloud environments, we can enable GitOps-based CI/CD automation for you to deploy modern cloud-native applications within your data centers as well as outside of Azure data centers. Next slide, please. So I wanted to quickly start off with some of these governance and compliance capabilities that we can bring into your edge locations, data center locations, as well as multi-cloud environments. Now, if you look at the top of this chart, you see Azure policy, something that we had for several years, which helps customers to enforce their organization's security, governance, and compliance policies seamlessly, basically to build guardrails. And then also initiate automated audits. And in case of, if there are any non-compliant resources, then Azure policy also can seamlessly make them compliant, right? By taking some remediation actions. Now, all of these capabilities are now available for your on-prem environments as well. Next slide, please. So now, apart from governance and compliance, we have also built a solid security foundation. In fact, we have thousands of cybersecurity experts that is monitoring and securing Azure as a public cloud platform. Now, on a daily basis, we analyze trillions of signals for us to detect and mitigate threats, right? Because and to that end, we are also investing more than billion of US dollar for us to secure our Azure public cloud platform, right? Now, as you can imagine, Azure could be one of the top platforms for some of these sophisticated threats. Obviously, we have to defend and protect our public cloud platform. Now, we are bringing those experiences into your on-premises and multi-cloud world as well. Now, we have built several of Azure security services. If you have already heard about Azure Security Center, Azure Defender, or Azure Sentinel. Now, Azure Sentinel being SIM as a service for us. If you heard about, if you have already deployed Splunk Enterprise or ArcSight on-prem, these are some of the popular SIM tools. Now we are offering those capabilities on Azure as a service, right? And we also have Azure Defender and Azure Security Center for you to understand your security posture as well as mitigate threats at the endpoints, right? Now we are bringing all of these cloud capabilities into your on-premises world as well, for you to secure and protect your workloads wherever they may be running. It could be on a multi-cloud world, or it could be hybrid cloud world, or it could be even in your on-premises environment. Let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so to that end, if you can play out that animation. So to in this slide, as you can see, our vision is to build one consistent Azure platform, meaning we want to enable customers to innovate in any environments that they like, right? It could be in on-premises, hybrid cloud, or multi-cloud, as you can see in the bottom of this chart. So the innovative Azure services are now available anywhere that you need, right? Basically for you to deploy cloud at your own terms. So now in the next few slides, I wanted to get into little bit more details onto many of these Arc capabilities. And then towards the end, I will summarize with Azure Stack HCI as the on-premises hybrid cloud platform. If you can go to the next slide. So now within Azure Arc, we have three major capabilities, right? The number one capability being is enabled by Arc-enabled servers. This is basically for you to have a central inventory, for you to have a single source of truth, for you to organize all of your resources under one single control plane. So in today's environment, we see customers deploying their applications in the form of virtual machines, in the form of containers on Kubernetes clusters across diverse infrastructures, right? You may have multiples of data centers, you may have edge locations, you may have multi-cloud environment. So obviously now your resources are spread across diverse infrastructures. Now, how do we organize and govern them under one single control plane? That is something Arc-enabled servers does it for you, right? For you to have central visibility and for you to have control over all of your resources across diverse infrastructures. Now, the second capability is Arc-enabled Kubernetes, which basically helps you to deploy your cloud-native applications anywhere at scale, right? The way we do it is through helping you to build helping you to enable GitOps-based automation, helping you to build one single CI/CD automation pipeline for you to deploy your cloud-native applications from a central control plane across any Kubernetes clusters. Now, your Kubernetes cluster may be running on AWS or on Google or on VMware, doesn't really matter, or on top of Azure Stack HCI, doesn't really matter. From a single control plane, you can enable automated deployment of these cloud-native applications. And now, last but not the least, now we are also pleased to announce that you will be able to seamlessly deploy Azure-enabled PaaS services. It could be the application services or it could be data services. By data services, I mean DB as a service, where Microsoft offers the patches, updates, and upgrades. This is similar to what we do in Azure Public Cloud, right? For Azure SQL and Azure PostgreSQL. Now, all of those PaaS capabilities are available on premises. Now, this is applicable for both hybrid cloud as well as multi-cloud environments. Next slide, please. Now, I wanted to quickly start off with Arc-enabled servers. As you can see in the right-hand side, there are several of Azure hybrid services that can be deployed into the workloads that may be running on premises as well as on AWS or Google, on the multi-cloud environments. Now, if you want to do backup to the cloud, DR to the cloud, if you want to monitor the performance, availability, health of the resources, or if you want to secure the resources, which is running outside of Azure, now Arc-enabled servers can be a great tool to make that happen. If we can go to the next slide. So now the next slide, this chart is about Arc-enabled Kubernetes. Now, if you look at the bottom of this chart, you see several Kubernetes distributions, right? Now, any CNCF compliant Kubernetes distro is validated and certified by Microsoft for you. So meaning from the Arc control plane, now you will be able to monitor and manage these Kubernetes clusters. And you will also be able to seamlessly deploy your cloud native applications on any of these Kubernetes clusters from a central control plane. So imagine an environment where you have several Kubernetes flavors running in diverse infrastructures. It can be really, it can introduce a lot of complexity, right? Especially when you have to deploy and manage those cloud native applications. With Arc-enabled Kubernetes, you are now able to do them, achieve that from a central control plane, right? Once you have the visibility of these Kubernetes clusters on a central control plane, you will also be able to secure and govern those Kubernetes environments right from Arc. If you want to enforce your organization security and governance policies, now you can do that through Arc-enabled Kubernetes. Next slide, please. So now, just wanted to quickly touch upon Arc-enabled data services. Now, if you look at the bottom of this chart, this is now available for any Kubernetes clusters or running on any infrastructure, right? It could be Azure Stack HCI, or it could be VMware, or even it could be multi-cloud environments like AWS or Google. So the only prerequisite being CNCF compliant Kubernetes distribution. Now it could be, Red Hat OpenShift. It could be AKS on HCI, or it could be EKS on AWS, or even it could be, GKE on Google Public Cloud, right? All of those Kubernetes clusters are tested and validated by Microsoft for you to deploy Arc-enabled data services. Now, so today we support Arc-enabled SQL as well as Arc-enabled Postgres. Now, today we see quite a lot of customers, running SQL 2008 or even SQL 2012. As we all know, SQL 2008, even the extended support is ended. Obviously, migrating from SQL 2008 to 2012 to 2014 to 2016, can be a massive project for customers, especially if you are dealing with several hundreds of SQL instances. Now, with Arc-enabled data services, we can really drive simplicity into those environments. When you deploy Azure SQL through Arc-enabled data services, Microsoft is responsible for providing the patches, updates, and upgrades. So we are enabling automation in terms of you patching, updating, and even upgrading your SQL instances, right? So your SQL will always be on the latest version, meaning it will always be evergreen, right? And it will also have backward compatibility all the way up to SQL 2008, so that your applications will never break, right? Application compatibility is also preserved, right? With the backward compatibility that is available all the way up to 2008. Now, with deeper integration into Azure services, high availability, disaster recovery, security, as well as ensuring governance and compliance of these workloads, all of them are available for these data services that you're running on premises or in a multi-cloud environment. Next slide, please. So now, if you are very familiar with some of these application services that we have on Azure Public Cloud, now all of these capabilities, including app service, logic apps, Azure functions, API management, event grid, all of them are now available for on-premises as well as multi-cloud through Arc-enabled application services. This is currently in preview. These services are expected to be GA somewhere during next year. Next slide, please. So last but not the least, when we talk about Arc-enabled data services, especially Azure SQL, now these services are available on an OpEx model, meaning you pay on a monthly subscription basis. This can come in very handy for your test dev environment, right? Where you may have several hundreds of instances. Once you tear down that environment, the monthly billing automatically stops. And the licensing starts from as small as 1 core, right? Next slide, please. So now I wanted to quickly shift gear and quickly talk about Azure Stack HCI for the next few moments. Now, Azure Stack HCI is actually a hybrid cloud infrastructure from Microsoft with native integration to several of Azure hybrid services, including Arc-enabled services, right? Now, on the bottom of the chart, you see several hardware offerings. Hardware OEMs like HPE, they have certified solutions for HCI. Their hardware offerings are validated by Microsoft for you to deploy HCI OS, which is Microsoft's operating environment, which is an integrated solution that brings software-defined compute, software-defined networking, software-defined storage as one single integrated solution. Now, HCI OS can be deployed on Microsoft-validated hardware like the ones from HPE. Now, once HCI OS is deployed, and once you have built your HCI cluster, you can seamlessly onboard your virtualized applications, which can be deployed in the form of Windows or Linux VMs, or which can be deployed in the form of Windows or Linux containers on Azure Kubernetes services. Next slide, please. Now, what are the use cases for Azure Stack HCI, right? Now, these are all very, very affordable solutions, starting from 2 nodes, and it can scale all the way up to 16 nodes within a single cluster. So we are targeting regulatory workloads, which cannot go to the public cloud. And we are also targeting high performance workloads, for example, SQL, which may require several millions of IOPS or several hundred thousands of IOPS. And we are also targeting modern microservices-based applications, which can be deployed in the form of Windows or Linux clusters, Linux containers, right? And then because we can start off as small as 2 nodes, these solutions can be very, very appealing to the branch office and remote office, especially if you are embarking on a branch office or remote office transformation projects. And then obviously helps you to modernize your data center infrastructure as well as some of your legacy applications. Next slide, please. And from a central console, now you are able to manage and monitor even up to 500 Azure Stack HCI clusters, right? So I'm not going into greater details because of the availability of time. But from a central console now, you are able to manage several hundreds of Azure Stack HCI clusters, which drives operational simplicity for you. Next slide, please. And so all the Azure Arc capabilities that we talked about so far, and all of those capabilities are applicable to Azure Stack HCI as well. Now, if you have deployed Azure Stack HCI for you to onboard modern cloud native applications, or you are running the legacy applications on Windows or Linux VMs, doesn't really matter. All of those workloads can seamlessly integrate with Azure Arc, services. Next slide, please. So this is going to be my last slide for today's session. If you want to kick tires, you have a couple of options. You can seamlessly deploy HCI OS, which is available in our public website for you to download. You can deploy them on the validated hardware. If you already own those hardware, you can seamlessly deploy HCI OS. And those validated list of validated hardware are available in our public domain. If you click the link above, or if you go to aka.ms/Azure Stack HCI catalog, or the second option is for you to procure those validated hardware from the hardware OEMs, and then you can build your own HCI cluster. Or our SI partners and hardware OEMs can help you to build the HCI cluster for you. And the HCI OS is available for a 60-day trial, so a great opportunity for you to build HCI cluster in a most affordable fashion. So with that, I would like to introduce the next speaker, who is Senthil Prakash, the regional director from HPE. He and his team of SMEs are responsible for Azure hybrid cloud solutions. So without further ado, I would like to thank you for listening in, and over to you, Senthil. Thank you.
Thank you, Sathish. Good morning, team. It's a pleasure to talk to you all. My name is Senthil, and I am based out of HPE Singapore, and I am responsible for the hybrid cloud business for the APAC region. Can you move to the next slide, please? So HP and Microsoft has a very strong partnership background. This partnership is more than 40 years old. And every day this partnership is only getting better, and it is getting better for helping customers in the digital transformation journey. Microsoft has a vision of a cloud to edge strategy, and HP has a vision and strategy which talks about edge to cloud. And we overlap in a lot of areas. So that's why it's a very good win-win partnership for the customers. And we do collaborate with Microsoft at the various levels. Especially, we supply our infrastructure to Microsoft Azure Public Cloud as a OEM vendor, and we also work very closely with Microsoft as a technology partner. We work very collaboratively with Microsoft to bring out solutions like Azure Stack Hub and the latest Azure Stack HCI, and we are also working on the Azure Edge solutions. And not only that, HP is also a qualified managed services partner for Microsoft, which are very few across the globe. And we are also a CSP partner. And our organization is also a certified implementation partner for implementing hybrid cloud services for the Microsoft solutions. Can you move to the next slide, please? So Sathish talked a whole range of services covering from public to the on-premise environment, and HP has various services, products, and solution offering covering the entire spectrum. If you take for example the public cloud, Azure, HP is capable of providing a proper minimum viable cloud, or what you call it as a landing zone, with our intellectual properties, because we have very good experience of working with enterprises. So when you go to a public cloud, we want to replicate the environment that you have in the data center to the public cloud, so that you can run your workload with a proper compliance. And not only that, once you deploy the workloads, we monitor the workload to make sure that the workloads continue to run in the compliance mode without any deviations. So we have a whole lot of services tailored for workloads running in the public Azure. And when we move towards the right, which is mainly talking about the data center, we have two offerings. One is the Azure Stack Hub. which was launched 3 years back, and we had a very great success story with Microsoft. And the latest very attractive offering is the Azure Stack HCI, which the Sathish gave an introduction in his previous in the previous session. So this Azure Stack HCI we have jointly launched with Microsoft, and it is available from HP for you to use. And we have certified this on our various HP hardware with various form factors and various storage options, which I will be explaining in detail in the subsequent slides. And like Satish mentioned, that you can also start Azure Stack HCI with 2 nodes in remote offices and remote brick and mortar stores. So we are also having a 1U form factor to cover those kind of scenarios. And not only that, Azure Arc is the glue that ties all these individual Azure Stack HCI clusters and helps you to run Kubernetes-based workloads across the multi-cloud environment. And many customers are on the multi-cloud journey. So we also help customer deploy the Azure Arc and make sure that the hybrid cloud environment is properly set up. And we are also having a master cloud services broker called as the cloud management platform, which will help you to tie the various multiple clouds and provide you with a pure cloud experiences in the on-premise environment. Can you move to the next slide, please? So you could see that we have certified our platforms for the Azure Stack HCI OS, right from 1U form factor to 2U form factor to high density servers, which can take up to 1 petabyte of storage, right, per node. And not only that, for the edge locations, we also have certified the solution on Azure Stack. We have certified on Edgeline 8000 servers, which are very small form factor servers, which can be carried like suitcases also. So we have various offerings, and all these are certified and validated, and you'd be able to choose any of these models according to your use cases or the business needs, and HP will be able to help you with the same. And in terms of the storage options, you would be able to see that we offer the very high speed NVMe capable disks for the data. For very high throughput performance for the workloads that requires very on OLTP kind of workloads with a very least response time. And the next one is we also support all flash NVMe, all flash SSD disks. And we also provide a hybrid combination where SSD disk can be the cache layer, and the spinning disk can be the data layer. So we have various combinations to suit for your workload requirements, like very high intensity or payment application, a very high intensive database cluster, or a regular virtualization workload, or it can be a remote offices. So we would be able to pick and choose the right choices from this offering. And these offerings are certified on both Intel as well as the AMD processors. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we have spoken about Azure Stack HCI. We briefly about on the platforms that is available for you to run, which is all already the work is done and predefined and tested and kept it ready for you to consume, right? But the major thing is that hybrid cloud provides a lot of good experience for the end users and the consumers. But when it comes to the IT department or the solution architect or the cloud architect, it is a little bit of complex ramp up. So they need to start properly and they need to start correctly to make sure that the digital transformation vision can be fulfilled properly. So that's why HP offers a range of services, right from building the hybrid cloud, innovating in the hybrid cloud, and also run the hybrid cloud properly based upon the cloud operations. So when you come to the we have advisory services where we collaborate with the customers, conduct workshops, understand their requirements, study their IT landscape, and we identify what are the workloads that can be run in the public cloud and public Azure, and what are the workloads that can be deployed in the Azure Stack HCI in the on-premise environment. What is the sizing for that environment required? We prepare the BOM, we do the POCs, pilots, and deploy it. And most importantly, the hybrid cloud networking is a very key important piece that has to be deployed and connect your data center to the public Azure with high availability. And those things are also we are taking care of it. Not only that, post that we also make sure that how the lifecycle management of this hybrid cloud infrastructure is managed properly, so that your everyday operations are more efficient and is in a very simplified way. And we do not want to just help you build the hybrid cloud offering and run VMs, right? We want you to move up the value chain and make sure that you are getting a better return of investment from these platforms. So we help you with Kubernetes adoptions like AKS. We help you to deploy the DevSecOps capabilities with the right set of CI/CD tools, so that you will be able to develop new cloud-native microservices applications for your businesses. So we cover the whole range of services, right from advisory, build, innovate, and the run services from the HP side. Can you move to the next slide, please? And one more important thing is to make sure that how you can adopt this solution in a quick manner, and also you have a faster time to market. We do not want you to have this project rolled out over a period of 12 to 18 months. We want to get started in a matter of 3 to 4 months. So we have done all the groundwork. We have integrated the Azure Stack HCI with the various third-party ISVs, so that based on the reference architecture, you will be able to deploy it in your on-premise environment, and you will be quick to run this environment. For example, any production workload requires a backup. So we have certified our Azure Stack HCI with Commvault backup solutions. So it is easy for us to integrate our appliance with a Commvault backup with no surprises. Similarly, if you want to have a DR capability, if you want to deploy containers, if you want to deploy the multi-cloud management portfolio, the security like load balancers, firewall, everything, right? So we have certified ISV solutions to be integrated with Azure Stack HCI, and depending upon your requirements, we will be able to offer these services so that you can adapt these solutions quickly, and you can roll it into production. Can you move to the next slide, please? And one of the key value differentiation from HP is like, yeah, people wants to move to cloud. The cloud can be a public cloud, it can be a hosted cloud, and in on-premise also the customer would like to have a cloud experience. So cloud is an experience, it's not just a destination, right? But at the end of the day, all things being equal, we also need to offer a cloud-based consumption model to our customers. You pay only for what you use, and you pay on a monthly basis, like how you pay for the Microsoft Azure platform, right? So in the on-premises also, we are offering the same capability. So all the solutions which comprises of HP platform, HP support, Azure Stack HCI licenses, the implementation services, the support services, right? Everything can be combined under what we call it as a HP GreenLake option, which is called as a pay as you grow option from HPE. So using this, you will be able to pay HP on a monthly basis, and that too only for what you consume. And not only that, we are also providing capacity on demand at the same rate for you in the data center environment, so that whenever you need additional buffer capacity, it is always available in your data center without any delay. You can start consuming it, and you can when you are finished working the workloads, you can release that buffer capacity, and you will be only charged for those durations. So this is a very, very important value proposition, and we have been very successful in selling this solution to the customers in Malaysia and all across the globe with this GreenLake option. This helps you to not invest heavily on the capex model, rather start small, start right, and make sure that the rest of the money can be invested in the business to grow. So this is one of the biggest unique value proposition from HPE. Can you move to the next slide, please? So this is actually the entire value proposition, that what we can tell as what we can offer from the HP side. Right, we have certified the appliances for Azure Stack HCI and Azure Stack Hub. It is offered with the 3 years or 5 years support, and we also offer you the implementation services, because hybrid cloud implementation is a little complex, and HP has the capability to do that. And you have to start right, and you have to start in a way that we will be able to grow in a modular fashion, and you will be able to source all the third-party software also from HPE through under the GreenLake options, and we will be able to provide Cloud Connect services, the value-added services like DevOps, backup, everything, and we also do offer managed services for the customers across the globe, and we are also working with local partners like Enfrasys to offer these services to you in Malaysia. So you can see like a whole range of the solutions right from end to end. We provide a platform services support to you. At the end of the day, you are just consuming this like any public Azure environment as a consumer, and rest everything is taken care for you by the HP and the Microsoft. So, and you will be paying us on a monthly basis for what you are consuming. Can you go to the next slide, please? So these are all some of the customers where we have successfully worked with Microsoft and helped these customers in the digital transformation by adopting Azure hybrid solutions. Can you move to the next slide? So with that, I end my presentation, and I would like to introduce my friend Arif from Enfrasys, who will take you through the value proposition that Enfrasys as a HP partner and Microsoft partner, what they are offering what they are offering in for the Malaysian customers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sathish and Senthil, for the lovely presentation. So yeah, I'm Arif from Enfrasys. So today we will talk about what Enfrasys will provide to the customer, to the agency. Yeah. Next slide. So this is the overview of all of the architecture for the agency. As you can see here from the left, there is the agency IT, and we will provide for the agency Asia, there will be an IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So we will have a unified self-service portal and marketplace for agency to pick and manage. So from there, we will have a proper process that agency will do. We will do, and we will have a process automation IT service management that will manage all of the ACM for the user. And then from the right, we see the MSP. That will be the Enfrasys that will deploy, configure, and migrate all of the agency. And on the bottom right is the inventory, monitor, and protect. That also will be managed by Enfrasys. So from the right, you can see from the top there is an Azure cloud, public cloud. On the right middle, there will be an this will be your Azure on the on-premise one, and the last but not least is the on-premise DC. This is where all of your on-premise data center will be there. So yeah, this is the high level of what Microsoft Hybrid Cloud the framework should be. Next slide, please. Okay, so Microsoft Cloud Service Provider Framework. This is the framework of what is the Microsoft Cloud Service is. So yeah, on the top, you can see Microsoft as a cloud service provider that we provide the business productivity and collaboration, subscription and for infrastructure and security, platform subscription for application and development tools, and last but not least is consultancy and professional and principal support. So in here on Enfrasys, we will be an MSP, managed service provider. First, we will provide a software provision lifecycle that you can buy license with us. We will provide the license. We will manage the lifecycle of the license so that you don't have to worry about the expiry date or the application already obsolete. So the third one will be the consultancy and support services. This we will provide you with the local consultancy. We will provide you with the support for your environment so that you can less manage the infrastructure and we will manage the infrastructure. The fourth one is the value addition and CS management service. So for this one, yeah, after you procure all of the license, the life cycle, the consultancy, so there will be changes for the application side from the infra side. So from that one, we will provide you the training, the change management, how to use the new product because of, yeah, after you change the product, there will be changes of how you manage it, how you maintenance it. So we will provide that also. And last but not least is partner collaboration services. This we will collect with a partner like Microsoft and Senthil from HPE, so that agency will have a full experience on the hyperconverged infrastructure. Yeah. Next. Yeah. So yeah, the next one will be the roles and responsibility. As you can see here, this will be using IaaS, AAS, and SaaS architecture. So you can see from the if you are using the on-premise, agency will manage all of the infrastructure, all of the operating system of the application, the information data, the device. So when we are with Enfrasys, we will manage your server, we manage your network and data center, and using the IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS topology. You can see here when with the IaaS agency, we manage all the operating system and all the application, the data. With the PaaS agency will only manage the application. On the back end, Enfrasys will manage all the operating system, the update. And the last but not least is the SaaS, which will be agency will only manage the application side for application from the user endpoint side. So Enfrasys will manage all of the application, the operating system, the network, physical host, the data center. Next. Okay. This will be the what's the architecture about. So on the bottom you can see the blue guy. That will be the Enfrasys. Will manage all of your. Maybe you have a multiple cloud on your environment. You have an on-premise. You have an Azure Stack ACI, Azure Stack, or any hardware that you have, and the right is your Azure Stack Edge. So from here you can see that Enfrasys will manage most of your infrastructure, most of your application side from the infra until the application side. Next. So last but not least, like this title said, that innovation anywhere with Microsoft and Enfrasys. From here, we will have a hybrid and multiple cloud. As mentioned by Sathish, you can have a single control plane with Azure, with Microsoft. You can bring all of Azure services to any infrastructure. You can. The next one will be the modernized data center with the Azure Stack and Azure Stack ACI. And the last but not least, in the future, we can extend the edge with the Azure IoT. And all of these will be managed by Enfrasys. As per title said. This will be my last presentation, my last slide. I will pass to the host. Next. Thank you, Sophia, for the.
Thank you. Thank you so much as well, Mr. Arif. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard just now from our presenters, sophisticated threats today requires us to be, able and to fully comprehend the issue, mitigate the impact, and to fully focus on the fastest recovery for agencies and, of course, the users, all under the umbrella. With this, we'd like to say thank you so much to Mr. Sathish, Mr. Senthil, and Encik Muhammad Arif for the very interesting session. I'm sure our audience have learned a thing or two on how to actually ensure our security. Now, thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for the speakers, please feel free to actually send the questions over to this email right here that we're putting on your screen, and we'll get them to respond to you after the event. We'll be responding you very promptly, so make sure that you email your questions right here, Bersama mysummit@microsoft.com. All right, so take a look at that, write it down. In case that you have any questions later on, we'll try our best to get your answers direct to you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, coming up, we have some giveaways from our partner, Hewlett Packard Enterprise. So with this, please complete this feedback form from HPE to get your feedback on your session earlier. And as a token of appreciation, you will receive 80 ringgit worth of Grab food vouchers. How awesome is that? Additionally, if you complete the feedback form, you may be among the 5 lucky winners to win another 80 ringgit worth of Grab food vouchers. You will be contacted by HPE if you are one of the 5 lucky draw winners. Please do this, scan this right now, and yes, the vouchers will be on to you very, very soon. Scan this QR code on your screen and click the link in the Q&A chat box to submit the form and be in the running to be one of the 5 lucky draw winners. All right, so this is all thanks to Hewlett Packard Enterprise to make sure that all of you are really feeling great today, especially at the Bersama Malaysia Summit. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to our next session. It is my pleasure to invite Mr. Richard Warner, APAC GBB Sales Lead, Azure Advanced Migration from Microsoft, to share more on how you can accelerate your journey to the cloud with Azure VMware Solution. Over to you, Richard.
Great. Well, look, thanks everybody, and great to be here and talking to you today. So as discussed, I'm going to be focusing on Azure VMware Solutions, and more importantly, how it can accelerate and simplify your journey to the cloud. Please move on to the first slide. Just jump on to the next slide. Great. So I think before I talk about what Azure VMware Solutions is, I want to talk about some of the key cloud challenges that we see every day, that we hear from you as customers. And I think one of those that continuously comes up is that thing, the question around lack of resource expertise. So I often speak to customers and they say, we want to do more in the cloud, but there's a cloud skilling gap. Our teams aren't fully trained yet. You know, we've been spending a lot of money on getting them trained on our previous systems. And, you know, there's a bit of a gap there. You know, this is one of the challenges that we have when we want to do more in the cloud, right? The second one we see, and is real, you know, a theme that comes up a lot within government and also within the financial industry, is really around that compliance piece. So how can I continue to meet my compliance and my governance when I'm deploying on a different platform, when I've got different operating procedures, right? And that's another challenge that the customers come to us about, you know, when they're trying to do more in the cloud or migrate to the cloud. And then the final piece really is around cloud migration itself. So actually, you know, doing the cloud migration, so things like refactoring the applications, you know, the possible downtime, you know, the business disruption it may cause, all of those things are big concerns for you. And we hear those concerns. And really at Microsoft, what we're trying to do is build solutions that mitigate these concerns and help accelerate your journey to the cloud. And Azure VMware Solutions, or AVS, as I will refer to it moving forward, is one of those solutions. If we jump to the next slide. Great, and as you can see here, one of the other things we want to talk about, and we double click a bit on that cloud migration point from the earlier slide, is really around the discussion for the cloud migration considerations. And what is this? So it's, you know, as customers, as you're looking to migrate to the cloud, obviously, you know, there's different considerations for different customers. It could be that there's a need for speed. And what we mean by that is that you could have software and hardware end of life cycle coming up, and you want to then migrate that into the cloud ahead of that life cycle renewal. You could have urgent capacity needs. You could have a data center contract expiry. All of these things are considerations that we have, we work with customers on when they're looking to make that migration, right? And what I'm going to be talking through this deck is how can we address some of these concerns? How can we address some of these considerations with AVS? Another one is really around cost and complexity. So we understand that, you know, you've got to look at project costs, resourcing, timelines. As I mentioned, application refactoring, re-architecting, that is not an easy project. That is not an easy task, right? And that takes time and money and so on and so forth, right? The other one that we constantly see from organizations is around that business continuity and downtime. Obviously, you want to keep that business continuity, that consistency, and you want to have minimal downtime when you're looking to do that migration into Azure. The final one I'll talk a little bit around is people and process. So what we find is that there's this, you know, when you do move to cloud, there is that impact on change management. And how do you manage that as a business? How do you understand that you've got keep that operational consistency when you actually look to the cloud? And how do you actually grow that cloud competency, right? So we think about the previous slide and all of these considerations. How does Azure VMware Solutions, or AVS, address this? So if we can just jump to the next slide, please. So really, what is Azure VMware Solutions, right? So quite simply, it's a comprehensive VMware environment. So if you're running VMware today on-premise, but it's on dedicated Azure infrastructure. So you can simply migrate that VMware environment you have on-premise into Azure, right? It's built by Microsoft and certified by VMware, right? It allows you to run your VMware workloads natively in Azure without refactoring or re-IPing, and it's supported and operated by Microsoft, right? The key thing here is, and if we look at some of the points that we were talking about earlier, it allows you to manage and secure applications across VMware environments and Microsoft Azure with a consistent operating framework. So if we think about some of the challenges or pain points that we were talking about earlier, you know, things around a cloud skilling gap, the fact that you can use the same tooling and the fact you can use a consistent environment and consistent operating framework, it mitigates some of those challenges that we were talking about earlier. It also helps with things like compliance because you can use the same IP addresses, you can use the same operating systems, right? So essentially, if you're running VMware today on-premise, you can literally lift and shift that into Azure and start to benefit from all of the Azure services and also the benefits that cloud brings, such as cloud bursting, changing CapEx into OpEx, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail on that as we walk through the deck. If we could jump onto the next slide, that would be great. Great. So if we look at this slide, this goes into a little bit more detail on what the actual sort of technology looks like. So as you can see on the left-hand side, you've got your on-premise data center that you run today, and you've got your VMware technology stack. So you've got your VMware vCenter. So if any of you are running VMware today, you'll be very familiar with things like ESXi host. You'll be very familiar with VMware vCenter. If you then look on the right-hand side, you will see a green box, and that is AVS. Essentially, it's built from that same VMware Cloud Foundation that you use on-premise today. So you've got vCenter, you've got vSphere, you've got things like NSXT to manage networking. All of these will be similar terms that you will know from your on-premise environment. And as I mentioned, the great thing is that when you actually migrate those applications or those workloads from your on-premise into AVS, again, no need to refactor those applications. You're going to be using the same tools that you know and love. So the cloud skilling gap or that lack of resource expertise is massively shrunk because you already know the tooling from your on-premise infrastructure that you use every day with VMware, right? But the awesome thing, the really great thing about this service is that you can then start to integrate with all of the suite of Azure services. So you can see on that right-hand side box, these are just some of the examples of the integration you can have. So you can integrate with Azure Active Directory, right, for your access. You can use Azure Security, Azure Monitor, SQL Database. And this is just a handful of examples that you can look to seamlessly integrate with once you've actually moved into AVS. And because AVS sits in the same data center as all of our other Azure services, you can seamlessly integrate with these services. The great thing about AVS as well is that it actually sits on bare metal, and you actually purchase it like you would purchase Node. So you get hardware and a software pack, and I'll talk a little bit more around that in detail. But from a compliance standpoint, you know that that hardware is dedicated to you. It's not a shared service, right? If we can jump on to the next slide, please, that would be great. So if we start looking at cloud migration strategies, and you know what we talked about at the beginning of this session, it was really about how AVS can help accelerate and simplify your migration to the cloud, right? So if we look at the cloud migration strategies, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the R model. So you do the rehost, refactor, re-architect, and rebuild. And obviously all of you guys have probably got this objective on your digital transformation journey. Where AVS sits and where its sweet spot is in that rehost R, if you like, right? And that really enables you to quickly reduce your CapEx, free up then data center space, and get a quick cloud ROI. And as I mentioned before, the great thing about rehosting is you can really accelerate that migration to cloud and start benefiting from all of the great suite of services that the cloud has to offer, as well as things like limitless capacity, burstable capacity, pay for what you use, all of those things that people love about the cloud. But the great thing about AVS is you're not having to worry about those pain points of refactoring and re-IPing, right? Which we all know can be a challenge. If we jump onto the next slide, please. So here we've got a really good example of how we actually find when you rehost, you can really reduce the duration of things like what plan and prepare, right? Migrate and innovate and secure and stabilize. When you rehouse, that really shrinks that duration. So if you're a customer who needs to get into the cloud, you know, for a compelling reason, maybe their data center expiry is coming up, or you want to move from a CapEx to an OpEx model and offset that physical data center charge, you can absolutely do that in a much more efficient and effective manner with AVS, because you are when you rehost, again, as I said earlier, that plan and prepare timescale is significantly reduced. The migrate and innovate significantly reduced, and that secure and stabilize is significantly reduced, right? And also what this does is it enables you to realize that cloud value even quicker. So, you know, today you may be looking to migrate to the cloud. Obviously, you've got that period of dual running costs where you've got your on-prem and your cloud costs. By actually using AVS, you significantly reduce that dual running cost period because you're able to get into the cloud and benefit from cloud economics even faster. If we could jump on to the next slide, please, that would be great. So if we look at this slide, really what we're saying here is it's reinforcing the points that I already mentioned. So we did some research with VMware, and we found that when you actually look to migrate using Azure VMware Solutions, you can see around a 71% less staff time involved in that migration, which is a significant amount of time that you save when you're looking to migrate, right? And also the great thing is, and this is what really resonates with a lot of our customers, is the fact that they can then reuse this time and actually invest this time in driving application development for the core business, right? Which is going to benefit their core business, their bottom line, and ultimately their customers, right? So why have your IT staff tied up in a large migration when then they could be doing something like building a new application that's going to optimize your business, right? And that's what this does. It frees up that staff time to go off and actually do something that's really going to be optimal for your core business and your core business operations, right? As we talked about before, you know, there's minimal downtime when you do this migration. You can extend those proven tools, skills, and policies. So from a compliance standpoint, you're still using the same operating procedures. You can use the same hypervisor and IP address, and you eliminate a large amount of that need for reskilling, right? But to be honest, AVS is that great way to rehost, right? But it's not the end goal. It's part of a stepping stone approach that will get you to that digital transformation, that microservice, that containers, that Kubernetes, where you want to eventually get to, right? And let me prove that out a little bit on the next slide. If we could jump to the next slide, please. So as I said here, you know, it is what we call a stepping stone approach. So on the left-hand side, you've got your on-prem, right? And you want to move to the cloud. You need to move to the cloud, but maybe you've got some compliance restraints around changing operational procedures, or maybe you've got some, you know, you're not, those legacy applications you have, you know, it's just going to be very hard to refactor those applications or to re-architect or re-IP those applications, right? So this is where AVS comes in. So we can say to you, okay, let's take those applications, we can migrate them. You can use the same hypervisor, the same guest tools, no resizing, same IP, do it via live migration. And the key thing here from a compliance standpoint is that similar operating procedures, right? Once you're actually in Azure, you're in AVS, you're sitting in Azure, you can start, as I mentioned, integrating with all those Azure services, and you can start to take it on the next step of your modernization journey. But the key thing here is you modernize when you're ready to do so. So when your team is fully skilled up, when you feel like the applications are ready, you can then look to modernize to PaaS, to containers, et cetera, but when you're ready to do so and when your team is ready to do so. But the great thing about AVS is you get all of those great economic and efficiency benefits of the cloud from day one. As I mentioned, AVS is just like any other cloud service. You can add additional nodes when you want. You can burst when you want. You can basically spin up a node to meet seasonal demand. And then when you're finished with that node, you simply turn it off and you only pay for what you use, right? So from an economic standpoint, from a flexibility standpoint, it gives you all of those great cloud benefits. But as I mentioned, brings the simplicity because you're not looking at having to refactor or re-IP those applications. If we can jump onto the next slide, I'll dig a little bit deeper into, the shared responsibility here. So what does it mean when you actually buy Azure VMware Solutions? Well, similarly to most cloud services, physical infrastructure now becomes Microsoft's responsibility. So if you look at the table on the blue table at the bottom, the blue squares now represent what Microsoft is responsible for. The gray squares represent what you as a customer are still responsible for. But if you look at this, what's really significant here is the fact that the blue squares are now massive. You're not having to worry about physical infrastructure anymore. You're not having to worry about physical security anymore. You're not having to worry about things like hardware failures, host patching. It's interesting. I was sharing this slide with a customer just last week, and he said that, his team are spending not just hours, but days and days and days simply doing host patching. And he worked it out, and, his team is like 3 or 4. Each of them are spending, maybe 5, 6, 7 days a month doing host patching. Once you add that up, that's looking at, quarter of the year you're spending doing host patching, right? Think about the fact that you offset that responsibility to Microsoft. That now becomes our responsibility. That gives your IT teams a huge amount of time to then go and really drill down and focus on their core business, right? They can go and focus on building awesome apps that are going to help promote your business. They can help, build apps that are going to help, you better integrate and interact with the public, right? This is obviously a public sector session today, and we're already seeing in other markets where the fact that organizations are able to free up their staff time, these organizations are now being able to go and build awesome apps to help their customers better integrate with things like purchasing of like water, of doing, getting council approvals done, planning permission, all of these things that, government organizations are trying to, better optimize, digitally transform and make more efficient. This really frees up the time for your teams to go and double down and focus on that. Yeah, if we could just jump on to the next slide, please. Great. So now I want to talk about, what are the typical use cases? I think we've touched upon the fact that, with AVS, we can definitely simplify and accelerate your cloud migration. We've shown you some of the statistics around that, and really how we can help you on that journey to, extend and grow into other areas, that digital transformation journey, right? But, what are the typical use cases, and what are we seeing most of the customers today using AVS for? So I think these are the 4 core areas, and I'll start on data center expansion, reduction, or retirement. So, I touched a bit upon this earlier, but where we're seeing AVS as a really optimal tool is, we're working with a number of customers who are coming to us and saying, look, we've actually got to get out of our data center. We thought we had a 12-month lead time. It's now a 6-month lead time, right? So we need to significantly accelerate that data center migration and reduce the time and effort that takes as well. So we said, okay, fine. Well, let's look at AVS. Let's look at, moving all of those applications. You're on VMware today. Let's move your VMware applications, and let's rehost them in AVS. And as I mentioned, no refactoring. So you're significantly reducing the time, right? As I mentioned, 71% less staff time. So this is a massive benefit in terms of getting those applications across. So again, we were able to work with this customer and actually reduce that migration time frame from what was around 8 to 12 months, and we got it into just below 6 months, enabling them to meet that requirement to exit that data center, hand off that data center, return that physical asset, turn that asset from a capex into an opex, get that asset off their books, and better deliver greater economic performance for the business as well. Another one which is really popular with a number of customers is data center expansion. So, today, if you're on premises today, and maybe you're a seasonal business, maybe you're working in the travel industry, and in the summer you have a huge peak demand to your resources, right? If that is the case, then, historically, you would probably need to buy additional hardware to meet that demand. Then when that demand is no longer required, you've got that hardware sitting there as a sort of dead cost, right? Now, the great thing about AVS is, say that same scenario is happening this year, you could literally go onto the Azure platform, spin up the AVS nodes, burst into those AVS nodes. Again, if you're using the same tooling that you use today with VMware, no refactoring, no re-IPing, but you actually are able to burst into those nodes, use those nodes for the period that you need that additional capacity, let's say a month or 2 months. At the end of those 2 months, you literally switch those nodes off and you only pay for those 2 months, right? So this gives you enormous flexibility, enormous scalability, and also has huge amounts of cost savings associated with it. So this is really one where we see, a number of organizations using AVS for that burstable capability. Another one where we see a lot of organizations using AVS is around that kind of disaster recovery scenario. So we're talking to a number of companies today who are actually, they've got 2 data centers, both of them on premise, or physical data centers, shall we say, that they run. One of them is their primary and one of them is their secondary. They're looking to offset that secondary data center, again, around to enable some cost savings, to actually turn that asset into, from CapEx effort into an OpEx scenario. Basically what we've been able to do is migrate that DR data center and use AVS as their DR. Working with things like SRM. I'll talk a little bit around that later. And that's significantly driven cost savings and efficiencies in the business, because now they only have a single data center to manage. The DR is now managed via AVS in the Azure data center. And as discussed earlier, we are now responsible for physical security, host patching, etc., etc. The other one, which we've talked about in length already, is really that speed and simplification of migration, right? So I'm not going to go over that in too much detail. We've covered that already in enough detail on the previous slides. But one of the ones that I really wanted to touch on is that application modernization, right? So as I mentioned on that stepping stone approach, what we're seeing with businesses is they are saying, right, okay, we maybe want to move and modernize some of our applications or some elements of our business. But some elements we just can't modernize because they're so legacy, we can't refactor or re-IP them. It's just going to be too hard, right? The customer I'm working with at the moment, it was actually modernizing their database to Azure SQL. The challenge they had was that database was actually servicing a number of their key apps. Now, these key apps, the problem we had with these was that they were very legacy, couldn't refactor, couldn't re-IP. So what we did is we said, no problem, let's migrate those applications, those old legacy applications, into AVS. No refactoring, no re-IPing. Again, similar operating procedures, etc., etc. So we're able to migrate those into AVS, but then integrate that with their Azure SQL database. Now, because they're all in the same Azure data center, we were able to optimize the performance from those the SQL database to those applications, enabling those applications to be more performant and deliver a better experience to their customers. Now, there's just one example of where we're doing that stepping stone migration and modernization at the same time, right? There's numerous examples of where we're working with customers today around similar scenarios. Another one of those would definitely be things like integrating with our whole suite of networking services. So, for example, we're working with a customer today, traditionally on-prem using VMware. They host their key websites in there. They're an e-commerce site, so obviously the websites are key. What we said is when you move those to AVS, why don't you start to integrate those that web front end with our CDN services, with our Azure Front Door services, right? Which optimizes that website and then delivers a better performance to those interacting with those websites, and actually giving them better efficiency, better return on investment, better sales, better billing time, etc., etc., right? And there's just a couple of examples of where we're helping organizations, modernize those applications with AVS and our suite of Azure services. And as I go through the deck, we'll talk a lot more around integration as well. Yeah, could we jump onto the next slide, please? So let's dig a little bit deeper into, how does it look, to deploy and manage Azure VMware Solution. So if we could jump onto the next slide, please. So, right, as I mentioned, it's seamless management for Azure infrastructure resources. You can easily scale infrastructure as your business needs it through the Azure portal, right? It's very, very simple. You can add new nodes as required to increase compute and storage during peak times. You can delete nodes seasonally, as I mentioned, with the holiday company example. You just delete those nodes seasonally when you don't need them, and you only pay for what you need, right? So this is a really good example of how, you can seamlessly manage it, your Azure infrastructure resources. If we jump onto the next slide, though, and this is something that, really is resonates with a lot of the audiences I speak to. If we could jump onto the next slide, please. Is this familiar and consistent VMware tools and technology. So as I mentioned at the beginning, remember one of the challenges we had around moving to the cloud? It was about the fact that there was that lack of cloud skills, that cloud skilling gap, yeah? Now, the great thing about AVS is you can continue to use those VMware tools and technology that you know and love today. On the right-hand side here is the vSphere client. So you can actually create operational consistency for your admins and continue to use your VMware for resources running on Azure. This is awesome, right? And this really resonates with a number of our customers. Access to things like vSphere, HCX, and NST are enabled when the private cloud is deployed in Azure, and the credentials are registered in Azure and they connect to the private cloud cluster hosts. So this is a great example of how you can continue to use that skill set and that muscle that you and your teams have learned around VMware, and I'm sure spent lots of time or money getting VMware certified. You can continue to use those tools and that knowledge with AVS. And this is something that, as I mentioned, really resonates with a number of our customers. We understand in Malaysia, most of you guys probably are using some subset of VMware or have some applications running on VMware. So, there is a host of these applications that we can look at and work with you to actually migrate to Azure using AVS. Yeah, if we could jump to the next slide, that would be great, please. And then just one more as well, please. So as I talked to you about, integration, right, is amazing. The fact that once you're in AVS, you can integrate with all of these services, right? It's not just SQL database, it's not just Azure storage, it's not just Azure VMs, App Gateway, Express Route. There's this whole raft of services that you now have access to. And, I'm just going to talk a bit about a couple of these, right? So the key thing, as I mentioned around AVS, is it enables you to preserve the status quo, right? It enables you to continue to use your existing investments, not just in your workload target for migration, but also on the Azure services that you currently use. So let's say you're already using things like Azure Active Directory, you can continue to use that and integrate that into AVS, right? The awesome thing as well is you can also start to use Microsoft tools. So AVS integrates with Azure native services and tools from backup, disaster recovery, SaaS services, containers, platforms, security solutions, and a whole load more, right, to build that best-in-cloud services, right? And also you can integrate with our partner tools. So AVS supports all of a robust list of partners and native solutions that cover things from backup, storage, firewall, load balancers, DR, monitoring, billing, as well as things like chargeback, many more solutions, right? I think some of the key tools that are considered, right, tends to be around things like Azure Backup. So you can use partner tools from Cohesity, Dell, Commvault, Veeam, Veritas, and more are supported by AVS. If you're thinking about disaster recovery, we support VMware SRM, HCX, Zerto, Jetstream, as well as Azure Site Recovery Manager. For the AVS supports both on-prem to AVS and AVS to AVS disaster recovery scenarios, right? So we've got backup covered, we've got disaster recovery covered. You can also integrate in terms of storage. So AVS supports extensions on vSAN storage using Azure Disk Pools and Azure NetApp files. And I'm going to talk a little bit more around that later on in a lot more detail. Both the solutions really enable scaling of storage without the need for additional hosts. Now, this is absolutely key. You do not need to buy another node now if you need more storage. You can literally do scaling of storage using Azure Disk Pools, which is awesome from a TCO perspective, right? Disk Pools supports iSCSI protocol as well, which I know resonates with a lot of people, and Azure NetApp Files supports NFS. Other thing I know is really important for a lot of businesses, especially those in government and public sector, is around security and monitoring, right? So AVS supports Azure Monitor, Azure Defender, Sentinel, Bitdefender, and many more solutions to help you secure your virtual machine OS and monitor them, right? The final thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was really around the network appliance. So AVS supports network appliances such as load balancers, firewalls, etc., etc. They all integrate at a network level. So you can see that AVS is the starting block, and it just gives you access to all of these supporting services and seamlessly integrates into those. Another thing I wanted to touch upon actually on this slide was really around compliance. So I know we talked a little bit around that earlier, but there's a whole raft of things that you can look to work with to ensure that you're compliant. So Azure Security Center regulatory compliance, enables you to track and monitor your industry-driven compliance frameworks, things like ISO 27001, right, among others. You've got the Azure Service Health and Dashboard, which updates the AVS solution in the form of maintenance schedules, security advisories, and health advisories, right? You can even set up alerts to send you alerts around, when these things change, right? The other thing I wanted to finally talk about when we're looking at integration is it's all, security is absolutely key, and we understand that. The great thing is you can leverage things like Active Directory, or you can leverage your existing Active Directory structure and roles to integrate with vSphere, right? AVS private cloud use vSphere role-based access control for enhanced security as well. You've got also the vSAN encryption is enabled by default, and you can choose between Microsoft's managed and bring your own key management capabilities as well. The last thing I'll just talk about is that, Azure Security Center, which is a key, one of the key things you can integrate with, is obviously it's a single pane of glass tool to help you be more compliant, or using always on regulatory compliance through threat protection, Azure Defender, security posture management, and much, much more. So again, you can just see that we've got the integration there for you in terms of integrating with all of this, the suite of services that can better deliver and innovate your business. We've got the compliance tools that can help you be more compliant within your business. We've got the security tools that can help you be more secure within your business. And I think the last thing on the security is that AVS infrastructure is part of Azure, and as such inherits the physical network and operational security controls that you know and love with Azure, right? That deep security controls that we have across Azure already. If you could jump onto the next slide, please, that'd be great. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that you can integrate with is disk-pools, right? Now, the great thing about disk-pools, as this has recently been announced in preview, is that it allows you to scale that storage independent of compute, lowering your TCO. So let's say you've got a node, each AVS node, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on this, has a set amount of RAM, a set amount of storage, and a set amount of cores, right? Now, if you just need additional storage, you do not want to buy another node with the RAM that you're not going to be using or the CPU you're not going to be using, right? So by enabling disk pools, you can actually just scale the storage element when you need without needing to buy additional nodes, therefore lowering your TCO, right? And again, as I mentioned, this is integrated with AVS and is fully managed as well. Awesome, again, in terms of your resources and the fact that Microsoft can offset a lot of that in terms of the management layer. If you could jump on to the next slide, please, that would be great. So another thing I wanted to touch upon was really around disaster recovery. So Site Recovery Manager, or SRM, it's a VMware product. I'm sure if any of you guys are using VMware today, and I'm sure a number of you are, you will be aware of SRM. Now, the great thing about SRM is it enables effective disaster recovery planning. It's critical to any organization. And now VMware Site Recovery Manager brings proven DL capabilities to AVS, right? So you guys, a lot of you are already using SRM. Now you can bring that capability to AVS, right? You can take advantage of SRM for common cloud disaster recovery scenarios, including, as I mentioned before, on-premise to on-premise VMware to AVS, and primary AVS to secondary AVS private clouds environments. The great thing is it offers intuitive and simplified experience for installations and lifecycle management of SRM directly, again, through the Azure portal. Again, really trying to simplify that management layer for you guys. And again, going back to the theme I said at the beginning, AVS is all about accelerating and simplifying your cloud migration. If we could just jump on to the next slide, please. And the next one, please. Okay, so what is it under the hood? What do you actually get when you buy Azure VMware Solutions, right? As I mentioned, this is a bare metal service. You're getting dedicated hardware and software, right? So bear in mind, on the left-hand side, this is the software specification that you get when you buy this service. Bear in mind, as I mentioned, this is a first-party Azure service. So it's just like buying any other service in Azure. You can use your EA, you can use a CSP. Just think of it as buying any other service in Azure. The great thing is, though, when you buy this, the software licensing for VMware element is included in the price. So you don't need to worry about, buying separate software. It's all managed under a single Azure cost. As well as this, you've got the hardware, right? So each node that you buy, you get 36 cores. You get just under 600 gig of memory, and you get just under 16 terabytes of storage. As I mentioned with disk pools, the great thing is if you need additional storage, you can scale that using disk pools without the need to buy additional nodes, right? Again, helping you with that TCO piece. So basically the way it works is there is a minimum requirement to take 3 nodes. So you have to start with 3 nodes, right? Now, once you've actually deployed those 3 nodes, if you want to buy an additional node, you can buy that in increments of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you need. You can buy 1 node, and then once you're finished with that node, you can delete it again. Like I said, you've got that infinite compute and burst ability that the cloud brings, but again, without that complexity of refactoring or re-IPing. If we jump onto the next slide, please. But the great thing is, as I mentioned, it's normal Azure service, so you can buy it in the usual ways. It's hourly billing and pay as you go. You can do reserved instances, both 1 and 3 year. And the great thing is, it is part of our Azure hybrid benefit. So we allow you to bring your Windows Server and SQL Server on-premise licenses with software assurance. You can bring those with you to AVS, just like you can on Azure. This also now applies for things like Red Hat and Linux subscriptions as well, which is great. So as well as that, we offer things like free extended security updates. So if you're looking for a free extended security updates for your Windows 2008, we appreciate those are coming almost to the end now, but also it's going to be applicable for your Windows 2012 and your SQL Server 2012. So if you're looking for free extended security updates, if you migrate those to AVS, we will be giving you free extended security updates then. Again, this is great from a compliance standpoint, because if you don't have that protection, you can basically migrate those servers into AVS, and you will have those security updates giving you that additional protection. And as I mentioned, the final thing is those reserved instances. So I think most of you will be familiar with reserved instances, but basically what they do is they give you a significant discount on the pay-as-you-go rate. So if you are to take a 1-year reserved instance, we will give you around a 30% discount. If you were to take a 3-year reserved instance, you'd be looking at around a 53% discount. So there's significant savings for you when you look to take advantage of reserved instances. And when you package that up with Azure Hybrid Benefit and free extended security updates, it really does make a compelling proposition. As I mentioned as well, because you're on dedicated infrastructure just for you, you can do things like CPU over subscription. So you can really optimize that infrastructure when you migrate it into AVS. If you could jump onto the next slide, please. And the next one, that's great. The final thing really is really about how do we wrap all of this up into a support model that works for you. The great thing is that we will give you a single point of support. So you've already got Microsoft support. Now, if you call up your usual support contact in Microsoft and you've got a VMware issue, or a Microsoft issue, we will manage that for AVS. So you have that single point of support. Again, simplifying the whole management process. Remember I said earlier, all of the VMware licenses are included in the Azure in the Azure AVS cost. So that simplifies in terms of the licensing purchase piece. All of support is managed by Microsoft Support, simplifies the whole support piece. And that's really what we're trying to do with AVS, is make it as simple and as effective for you to really make that cloud migration and remove those cloud blockers that I talked about at the beginning of this presentation. So I think really, if we talk about, you know, AVS in some detail, it's really about simplicity meets flexibility. And what do I mean by that? I mean that it's simplified management. It's a single pane of glass to manage vSphere-based and Azure native VMs, utilizing role-based access controls and monitoring, right? It's simplified scaling because it allows you to deploy new nodes on demand in the portal in under 2 hours, right? Only pay for what you use, giving you elasticity, scalability, and fast provisioning cycles. It's simplified migration, right? Because you're using the same hypervisor, IP address, and tools you did on-prem. Operational downtime will be minimized using vMotion via HCX, allowing you to move VMs without shutting them down. It's simplified single point of support, as I talked about earlier. It's simplified licensing and consumption. As I mentioned earlier, bring Windows Server and SQL Server on-premise licenses with software assurance, and avoid unnecessary complexity and take confidence in managing a single vendor for licensing and resource consumption. And it's simplified product partnership because we've got deep partnerships between Microsoft and VMware and all of our other partners that you can link into who are trained on AVS and can support you in this project. So yeah, if we can, I just wanted to end on one sort of shout out to everybody here. Hopefully this has given you an indication of like the real benefits of AVS, how it can really simplify that cloud migration. And I really hope you reach out to us and this has been useful. I really wanted to end with one thing though. We actually have an offer, so you can, if you jump to the next slide, please. And the next slide. Where you can actually, we will be giving customers a free 30-day pilot. So if you would be interested in trying out this solution, in actually getting a fully deployed, full-featured 3-node cluster, you can get that, speak to your Azure reps, and we can help you to give you that 3-day trial where we can help you build a production-ready POC. This is not a sandbox environment. This is a production-ready POC where you can actually start putting your workloads on there. You can start testing things like vMotion, HCX vMotion. You can use a number of test cases on this. You can actually test things like the SDDC. Deploying an SDDC, see how quickly you can do that. You can start integrating with things like Azure Active Directory all over this 30-day pilot, which we will help you deliver. So if this is of interest, let us know, reach out to us, and really look forward to working with you and driving this AVS projects with you. So that's the end of my presentation. That's the end of my session. If you do have any questions, please do drop them in the chat, and I'll happily answer those. Otherwise, I will end the session there and hand it back to our host for this great session. Thank you for your time today.
Richard, thank you so much for your great input. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard him spoken about VMware environments on a dedicated Azure infrastructure dedicated to all of us to ensure specific strategies are in place for a smooth, fully integrated solution, especially for the public sectors. Thank you so much once again, Richard. And now, ladies and gentlemen, in case you have any further questions, feel free to send them over to this email right here, and we will try to respond to you as soon as possible after the event. Bersama mysummit@microsoft.com is the email for you to go to send all your questions so you will get your answers right away. Now, moving forward, for our final session of today, I would like to invite Ms. Deepshikha Rana, Digital Enterprise Specialist Azure from Microsoft, and Mr. Neil McLoughlin, the Field CTO from Nerdio, to share further on how we can manage our hybrid workforce during COVID-19 and beyond using Azure Virtual Desktop. Over to you, Ms. Deepshikha and Mr. Neil.
Thank you, Sophia. Hi, everyone. My name is Deepshikha, and I'm the Azure Enterprise Specialist for the Malaysian business. And I'm really excited to talk about Azure Virtual Desktop Service today with you, right? And on call, I also have got Mr. Neil from Nerdio, our partner team, to show us later on that how Nerdio Enterprise Manager can help us support land Azure Virtual Desktop for the businesses in a very cost efficient and easy, effective manner. Thank you. Let's move on to slide, guys. All right, just the next slide. All right, guys. So before I move on to why Azure Virtual Desktop Service, let's understand what is actually Azure Virtual Desktop, right? So in a very simple terms and words, it is a desktop. It's a fully managed desktop and app virtualization technology. And if your organization is looking for a highly efficient, secure, and productive approach to desktop virtualization, then this is the service that can actually help and support you. Now let's understand why AVD and what are the scenarios it can actually help the businesses in the COVID world, right? Next slide, please. Cool. All right. So, being in IT, we are always, facing this ever-growing demands from the higher end user computing power, right? And there are different reasons and scenarios for it. Now we have distributed workforce that's working in different parts of the country. We have got, situations where we need to bring our own PCs because we cannot ship the devices to the employees. We have people working in field roles in different branch locations, right? Then every business ministries have got certain security regulations and government standards to meet. How do I make sure, I'm complying to all those standards while providing the remote work opportunity for the employees? And there is some sensitive customer data that we have to make sure that's not leaving the data center or it's handled sensitively. Third, we have, got some elastic workforce requirements. Every now and then, we have mergers, acquisitions happening, right? We are hiring workforce on contract. We have partners coming from outside to work, and we have to provide them either full desktop or specific apps access to complete their work. And these are, some of the scenarios where AVD can help. And before I move next, um, last but not least, it's line of business applications. Every business has some traditional LOBs that have got some specific requirement for the physical hardware, maybe GPU enabled machine, their legacy applications, and we cannot kill them. We cannot do not have the bandwidth to upgrade them, but I need to make sure that my employees remotely are able to access. These are various situations where we have been seeing globally that AVD service has been helping. Next slide, please. All right. So AVD, definitely, it's a VDI management service that's fully running on Azure, right? You can say it's a successor for your traditional remote services technologies from Microsoft that been on-prem. But the beauty of this service is that it gives you a high degree of flexibility when you are trying to have a remote desktop services for apps and desktop virtualization on cloud. You can bring your own images. You can customize the configuration as per your business needs with it. If I'm still using Windows 7 and I cannot upgrade to Windows 10 for any reasons, then I can still use AVD and have free extended security updates while I plan my upgrade. It easily very well integrates with your existing M365 apps and solutions like OneDrive, Office, etc., so that you can provide that services to any user on any device. Next slide. Yes. The great news is AVD service is generally available to all the regions in Azure, wherever your customers are. It's the only service that gives a multi-session Windows 10 experience. You can give a complete desktop to one user. You can have multiple user that's sharing one virtual desktop in a pool model, right? And these desktops can or apps can be accessed on your mobile phone, your tablet devices, your laptop devices, anywhere. And another thing, when we have to consider AVD, if you have got legacy infrastructure, on-prem RDS infrastructure is there, and we are having scaling issues in it, then we can consider Azure Virtual Desktop Service to modernize it further. Another thing, maybe, it's not you always have to create big RDS form, procure that hardware just so that you can meet the seasonal needs. With AVD, you can deploy the images in minutes and make sure that you are scaling when needed and scaling down when the work is done. That way you only pay for what you are using and not just procuring the whole hardware unnecessarily. So it offlifts a certain cost on the IT part as well. Next slide. Yes. Yeah. So what you see on screen is a high-level service architecture of Azure Virtual Desktop Service. On the right side, on the top, you see your subscription, your control. What it means, all the apps or the services, resources that is running in your subscription, Azure subscription. You have full control on your virtualized desktops, the apps you are publishing, who's accessing it, is authentication, right? The networking policies for it. What is the size of the VMs on which it's going to be running? All these things are in your control. And what Microsoft takes care of is the underlying compute, the VMs, the storage, the network part of it, the AVD engine, we take care of, the gateway service, connection broker, how's the load balancing happening for all the users that's connecting to it, and the diagnostics on it. When you have to connect to all the resources that's running in your subscription, you can connect via Azure Express Route or site-to-site VPN. You have a seamless integration with existing Azure AD. If you're using SCCM or Intune, it can seamlessly integrate for it. It's not necessary that you have to use a Windows OS only. You can use the Linux systems as well. Next slide, guys. Thank you. Yes, I think we quickly realized, that every business is unique and you have different apps, and there's a high degree of chance, we might have compatibility issues when we are trying to, virtualize our machines, desktops, and apps. So Microsoft comes and gives an app assure application compatibility promise. That means when you're trying to deploy things, if you have any compatibility issue, encounter any issue, then we will remediate it at no additional cost for you so that you can move forward and take the business decision of virtualizing with AVD more confidently. Next slide. Yes. So this is, guys, what you see on screen is list of all the licenses that if you already own, then you can easily get started with Azure Virtual Desktop. If you're already holding M365, E3, E5, or any of the version you see, you already have the CAL. If you have old legacy RDS CALs with software assurance benefits, that also applies to it. All you have to pay is the compute cost. That means for your resources, the VMs, the storage, network, on your apps and desktop runs. That is what you extra pay for, and rest is covered. Next slide. Guys, now I would like to, invite Mr. Neil from Nerdio to talk about how Nerdio Enterprise Manager can help land AVD in a cost-effective manner, and how they have helped the other businesses in COVID world for, immediately going ahead and doing the deployments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as we just mentioned, so my name is Neil McLoughlin. I'm one of the field CTOs over here at Nerdio. So with Nerdio, we basically expand on the Azure Virtual Desktop solution, and we make it much quicker and easier to deploy Azure Virtual Desktop at scale. So next slide, please. So we have a product called Nerdio Manager for Enterprise, which is specifically focused on Azure Virtual Desktop. So Azure Virtual Desktop is all we do over at Nerdio, and that's what we specialize in. And we've migrated over 3,000 companies over to Azure Virtual Desktop. Certainly that increased massively during the pandemic, which we're going to discuss slightly more in detail today. So next slide, please. So digital transformation is quite an interesting product, interesting sort of theory. So what we thought we could see is certainly government agencies, digital transformation can run slow. Certainly some transformation projects run within years potentially. Some we've seen some last like 3 years. So what we saw during COVID essentially was a lot of accelerated digital transformation. So customers who would have predominantly taken between 3 to 6 months, for example, to do a basic project, we had to get those customers up and running within a matter of days. Okay, so that's what we saw a lot at Nerdio. So I'm here to share some of the sort of stories of how we do that today in this presentation. So next slide, please. So I touched upon a bit more detail, so some numbers for you. So what we saw, personally at Nerdio, we saw like ×10 growth within Azure Virtual Desktop. I know Microsoft reported some numbers publicly, which I've shared with you here, but they saw a 775% increase in teams due to people remote working due to COVID. Microsoft, again, officially reported the Windows Virtual Desktop usage ×3. That was shortly after the sort of pandemic hit, but certainly now towards this current time, we're seeing like more like ×10 growth. Over here at Nerdio. Azure Virtual Desktop is a solution which you can easily deploy at scale due to the requirements that we saw during the pandemic. So it's same with sort of all the other Azure services as well. So Microsoft again reported that within the government, the use of Power BI dashboards increased by 42% as well. Because obviously a lot of those were used for reporting services for COVID figures and stuff like that. So next slide, please. So historically, what we've seen in this, so obviously pre-COVID hit, the world was a nice sort of happy place. Government sort of projects were ticking along nicely. And then suddenly, very fast, and around March 2020, we're all sort of thrown into this massive turmoil where pretty much straight away, the whole sort of world seemed to grind to a halt. For businesses and certain government agencies, that posed a huge problem because most people at that time weren't used to remote working. Most people went into an office, they sat at their desktop PC, and then suddenly you've been told you need to go and work from home. Now, how do we keep sort of projects going when, I mean, especially for government agencies, that's when you're most needed the most, right? That's when you need your staff to be at all levels, sort of all working as hard as they can do. So how do we deal with that? So this is where kind of Azure Virtual Desktop kind of kicked in. And we were able to pretty much respond immediately. I mean, those figures that I shared with you just in the previous slide, they pretty much happened overnight. You could, if you ever seen the graphs, you can literally just see the spike in traffic. Azure Virtual Desktop's been provisioned in Azure, just increases massively. So we went through 3 stages. Respond, recover, and thrive. Okay, so respond was how do we get our agencies up and running? How do we get our workers connected to our environments? And the answer to that was Azure Virtual Desktop running on Azure. The reason being is you don't have to spend time going out buying physical desktops, building them, shipping them out to customers. You can literally just build a desktop within Azure, an Azure Virtual Desktop, and have your agencies, government agencies up and running within a matter of days. That's certainly what we did a lot of here at Nerdio. And what that looked like is the focus on the essentials. So we needed to get the bare minimum bones up and running. So those really, really key workers that the companies needed. That's what we managed to do really fastly. So once you've got your basic workforce up and running, you then go into the recover stage. So your recover is right. Okay, we've got our key people up and running. How do we go here from here? So then we need to get our next set of users up and running. Okay, so at this stage, what we started to see was more of a bit of a fine tuning of the Azure Virtual Desktop environment. Obviously, the response stage was like, we don't care how much it costs, we don't care how long it takes, just go do it. So the recovery stage was more of a fine tune to that. And what we see now is the kind of the thrive stage. Okay, so things are calmed down a bit now. People have had a bit of time to sit back and think and reflect about what's going on. And a lot of those decisions that were made during respond and recover stage are now being sort of looked into again. And like, how can we use this sort of Azure Virtual Desktop solution to manage our rather than going forward? Some companies have continued to use the same solutions and continue the same way of working, as in not go back to the offices and continue to work 100% remotely. Some have said, right, okay, now we know how critical it is to have a sort of DR capability or continuous working, and they're now using Azure Virtual Desktop for that as an extension of their network, and that's certainly what we're seeing a lot more of as well. So next slide, please. So this is a slide that was shared by Gartner, which basically shows what sort of happened over the past sort of 12 months sort of work trends. If I showed you this slide 12 months ago, it would be a lot different to what it is today. So what we've seen is more workforces working remotely. Okay, so personally, when the COVID hit, I used to work for a company which employed 16,000 people. I was told I was not allowed to work from home. That company has now shut down all their offices, and they all 100% remotely. We hear many, many stories of that. And we're also seeing increase of usage of employee data as well. So personally, we're seeing that as well. Because your desktop users sit in Azure, they're using sort of Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Azure Virtual Desktop, we can track the data a lot more rather than someone working locally at a workstation. And the many, many more things I won't go into detail, but you can find most of the details on this slide as well. So next slide, please. So how does Azure Virtual Desktop sort of help us relieve, sort of help with this sort of COVID pandemic and sort of going forward? How does it help with delivering a remote workforce? So we can deliver desktops anywhere. Obviously, we just touched upon this in the previous set of slides, but we can deliver Windows 10 and Windows 11 desktops within a matter of hours, days, months. Certainly, as I mentioned before previously, it could have taken us 6 months to stand up projects. I can deliver you a whole desktop solution within a matter of days. Quickly, simply, and most cost effectively as well. Deploying scale in minutes. So as we touched upon, we can easily deploy. I mean, I've heard of many stories. I think one company, which a colleague of mine, one person who spoke to Microsoft, they deployed like 10,000 desktops over a weekend. Users, pandemic hit Friday, need to get up and running. Users come in on Monday morning, 10,000 desktops sat there ready and waiting. You try and do that with a physical desktop estate, it's impossible. So that's sort of the power and flexibility that Azure Virtual Desktop gives us running on Azure. And reducing costs using licenses as well. So again, as Deepshikha touched upon previously, if you use your Windows 10 enterprise licenses, which you have today, you don't have to pay for Azure Virtual Desktop. Okay, licenses is included with your sort of E3 and E5 licenses. So all you need to pay for is the additional Azure compute, and we can massively reduce that as well using Nerdio, which I'll go through shortly, and also security as well. So Microsoft data centers are ultra secure. So would you rather have a laptop with all your data sitting on it, which someone can easily, maybe you don't have encrypted, so that data is viable to sort of theft or someone getting hold of that data. When you're running an Azure Virtual Desktop, all your data is held within Azure data centers, which is ultra secure. Microsoft invests sort of billions of pounds every year in security. So if you want to have the ultimate security solution, then you really should be looking at Azure Virtual Desktop. Next slide, please. So this is what I think Deepshikha showed a similar slide shortly, but what you have here is basically who controls what. Okay, what do you control? What do Microsoft control? So essentially, you control all the desktop and remote applications. Okay, they're all within your own control. So you can literally take your existing images that you have today, lift them and shift them straight into Azure Virtual Desktop and have them running. Okay, so or you can go and create new images. It depends how easily, quickly you want to do it. Personally, I've worked on many projects where we basically just got the existing image, uploaded it into Azure Virtual Desktop. I had that exact same image that we're running on-prem within Azure. So it really is very, very quickly and easy to do. So also within Azure Virtual Desktop, you have all the same stuff that you used to do on-prem as well. So you can do image management, profile management, application management. So there's a lot of stuff we control. We can control network policies. So if you need to use stuff like Azure Firewall, for example, to really lock down a secure environment, we can do that as well within Azure Virtual Desktop. So if you have any Azure policies, Azure Virtual Desktop can easily fit into those as well. And the stuff that managed by Microsoft as well, so you don't have to. So what this also means is, I mean, typically in sort of very complicated government infrastructures, you'd have teams managing all that infrastructure. You don't have to do that anymore. You can concentrate fully on the desktop and giving your users the best user experience that they want, because we don't have to maintain all that existing infrastructure, because Microsoft look after all the brokers or the gateways or the load balancing or all the diagnostics, stuff like that. Okay. Next slide, please. So why should we trust Azure Virtual Desktop? As I mentioned before, Microsoft invests a huge amount of money and resources into security. We have technologies which are constantly evolving at pace. So if you think about stuff like your sort of MFA, which is now built in by default by Microsoft, stuff's encrypted at default. So when you build a desktop within Azure Virtual Desktop, everything's encrypted. So even if somebody does get its hands on the data, they can't do anything with it. And we also have all the existing platforms that we have, like Azure Firewall, which is consistently improving, Azure Security Center, which will alert you to any problems within your environment. Azure Sentinel as well, which is like sitting above all your stuff, looking at what's going on, and if it finds anything which there's a problem with, it will automatically detect you and alert you to any security problems going on. And there's much more stuff as well. So again, Microsoft will continue and evolve to security. And the good thing is, when you use Azure Virtual Desktop, you're automatically getting those built-in stuff for free. You don't pay anything extra. This is a subscription service, so you get all those things included at no extra cost to yourself. Next slide, please. So what does a typical environment look like? So this is a very high level overview of what it looks like. So we have Azure Active Directory, and you also need a full Active Directory as well. So then we have the broker plane as well. So this is what Microsoft control. This is what your users connect to. So this is fully supported and maintained by Microsoft. And then we have our network connectivity. Okay, so if you have an existing on-prem environment, you can connect to that either using ExpressRoute or site-to-site VPN. So that enables you from your Azure Virtual Desktop connect back into your sort of on-prem resources. And then, of course, the Active Directory. So you use something like Azure AD Connect to sync up your Active Directory into the Azure AD. Coming forward as well, hopefully quite soon, sometime next year, we'll have pure Azure AD. So you won't even need to have domain controllers anymore to even simplify your environment even better. So, and then you have your desktops. Okay, so the desktops are stuff that you control, stuff that you provision, and these are the ones that your users will connect to, hosting all your sort of government applications and all that kind of stuff as well. And then we have our storage. Again, we can manage these via Nerdio, which can go into a bit more detail, but that particularly consists of Azure files or NetApp files, and they will hold, or you can configure those to hold your user data or your sort of FS Logic profiles. So next slide, please. So a bit more about Nerdio, why I'm here speaking to you today. So I mean, essentially, we build on top of Azure Virtual Desktop, and we make it even simpler, cheaper and faster to get Azure Virtual Desktop deployed. Some companies essentially struggle to get Azure Virtual Desktop up and running, basically because they don't have the necessary Azure skills. So we make it easier for you to get things up and running. So we've been around since 2016, and then where we are today in 2021, we launched a few new products, which is Nerdio Manager for Enterprise, which I'm going to talk to you today, and a Nerdio Manager for MSP as well, which is what we do. It's a multi-tenant for finite service providers, but today we'll focus on Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. Next slide, please. So basically, we've been working with Microsoft very, very closely since it became, before it was Azure Virtual Desktop. It used to be called Windows Virtual Desktop. We've been working with likes of Scott Manchester & Co. We've got over 1 million users that we manage with Azure Virtual Desktop, and we've done over 3,000 custom deployments, which we continue to do at scale, probably around 200 a month. And we sort of evangelize sort of Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365 technologies. Next slide, please. So these are the features which we do. So we like to split it into three, sort of simplify and automate, scale and optimize, and secure and protect. So simplify and automate, which means we can basically get up and running with images within Azure Virtual Desktop quickly. I mean, the fastest I've gone from 0 is in 2 hours. So I can literally store Nerdio, create an image, create a host pool, and connect to that within 2 hours. So if I wanted to create an extra, 5,000 desktops, I can probably do that within another hour or so. So that's how quickly you can be up and running within Azure Virtual Desktop using Nerdio. Scale and optimize. So historically, if you Azure Virtual Desktop is a consumption-based service. You're consuming Azure resources, so you still have to pay for all your compute. You still have to pay for all your bandwidth. You still need to pay for all your sort of storage. So Nerdio enables you to optimize that by using an auto-scaling technology, where we can basically turn off those resources when the users aren't using them, and you're only paying for it when you actually need to pay for it. That enables you to save up to 75% on your Azure compute and storage costs as well. Secure and protect, so we have RBAC stuff involved, so we can also log everything that you see, everything you do within Nerdio and Azure Virtual Desktop as well. Plus we also have an end-user service portal where users can go and connect to it. And recently as well, we've released disaster recovery features within Nerdio. which basically enables you to split your Azure compute into different availability zones automatically within Azure. And we can also split our host pools, which is what your users connect to, into multiple Azure regions. So if there's an issue with one Azure region, then the rest of it, then users will be automatically diverted to the secondary region as well. So they don't have no outages or anything like that. Next slide, please. So we also support Windows 365. So if you aren't aware, Windows 365 is an alternative solution to Azure Virtual Desktop. So Azure Virtual Desktop is consumption-based. Windows 365 is subscription-based. Okay, so you pay for your Azure resources on a monthly basis, a flat fee, and that enables you to connect to your desktops at any time without having to incur any additional costs. Nerdio fully supports that as well. So we can create our images and share those with Azure Virtual Desktop and simplify how you manage Windows 365 and AVD together. Next slide, please. So across 3,000 deployments that we've done, this is typically what we see how the cost is split up. The cost is a major factor when deploying Azure Virtual Desktop, purely because it is a consumption-based service. Okay, so you need to be careful of your costs, or you'll be in trouble. So what we see is basically compute consists of around 70% of the cost, OS disk around 12%. FS Logic storage, which is the user profiles, that consists of around 9%, and then networking, which is the bandwidth, your bandwidth going in and out of the desktop, that can around 3%. Then other stuff, which is the sort of log analytics workspaces, all that kind of stuff, that comes in at 6%. Next slide, please. So how does Nerdio help you reduce these costs? Okay, so we got 6 strategies which you mainly do, and they basically can save us up to 83% that you would do if you didn't do anything. So out the box, if you didn't do any auto scaling or anything like that, your VMs will be very much running 100% of the time, and therefore incurring costs. So what we basically do is VM power management. So we have a really advanced auto scaling mechanism, which basically enables you to sort of fine tune when your VMs are available. We released recently a new one, user-driven auto scaling, which basically means when the users connect to the desktop, it will power on, and when the users log off the desktop, it will power off as well. So you only actually pay for that as your compute and storage when you actually need it. Just-in-time provisioning. So using our auto scaling technology as well, we can also create hosts only when you need them. So again, when you create a VM within Azure, even if it's powered off, you're still paying for it. You're still paying for storage. So we enable you to really actually create those hosts and delete them as well. So only when you need them. So you're not you're not sort of spending any money that you don't need to. Reserved instances. So this is a common question which we get often. So some customers use reserved instances. If you're not aware, reserved instances is a method where you can basically pay for your Azure compute costs upfront on a 3-year contract basis. So you can leave them running 24/7, for example, and you won't need them extra costs. So what we do at Nerdio is we analyze the analytics of your environment, and then we'll basically tell you what's the minimum number of reserved instances that you need to do. So if you know what your set number of user base is going to be, use reserved instances for those, and then we can use the pay-as-you-go using auto scaling for the rest of your stuff. So you're getting the best of both worlds. An OS disk auto scale as well. So essentially what we do there is we, again, when you provision a desktop VM within Azure using Azure Virtual Desktop, you pay for different stuff. So the standard HDD, standard SSD, and premium SSD, they all have different IOPS performance, and you pay more for each level. So what we do within Nerdio is when you power off the VM, we'll automatically switch it from a premium SSD to a standard HDD, so you're actually paying a lot less for your Azure compute as well. And we also enable you to basically shrink your OS disk down to 64 gig, so you can create 64 gig OS disk rather than the standard 127 gig disk that you get with Azure. Again, that can halve your storage costs. And the 6th one is a FS Logic, so we enable you to shrink your FS Logic profiles, and we also auto scale the FS Logic's Azure file share as well. So again, that could come down to quite a considerable saving depending on your environment. So those 6 strategies alone will probably save you up to 83% on your Azure compute and storage costs. Next slide, please. So let's look at a case study. So this is the case study which we did with the New York City Environmental Protection Agency. So they're a government agency. They went into the sort of pandemic as they were. So obviously, a lot of government agencies, services need to keep them running during COVID, right? You can't just say, oh, everyone go and work from home, stop. Bins still needs to be collected. All the stuff needs to be done. So New York City Environmental Protection had this exact same problem. So next slide, please. So essentially what we did, we migrated 2,000 employees to Azure Virtual Desktop in a matter of days. I think the number of days was something like 2 to 3 days. We went from literally having nothing, purely physical environment with no Azure sort of capability, and they went from 0 to 200 within, I think, 3-day period. And now they're basically able to work from home, all of them, without having to go into the office. It saved them a significant amount of time in deploying Azure Virtual Desktop. So they managed to reduce a 4.5-week task down to just 3 hours using Azure Virtual Desktop. And we used Nerdio to basically provision the image and provision all the desktops on that as well. So very, very successful projects, and we have hundreds more like this as well. And that's the end of my presentation. So I'd like to thank you for listening. And if you need to get in contact with myself, you can just do a search for me, or get in contact with Deepshikha, and she'll get in touch with me also.
Thank you, Ms. Deepshikha and Mr. Neil. They've shared with us on how to manage a hybrid workspace using the Azure Virtual Desktop. And of course, a walkthrough on how convenient, specific, and comprehensive it is to ensure the fluidity of our agency's workflow. Thank you so much once again. A sneak peek into what we have in store tomorrow. The theme of the sessions is using cloud to improve operational resiliency and agility. Our speakers will be sharing on how you can improve operating resiliency by implementing backup and disaster recovery solutions on cloud. Following that, we'll have a session on Power Apps, and you will see how some of the apps can help empower innovation in your work. We will also hear from Petronas on their modern engineering practice and how Azure helps them in their development to operation. And finally, our speaker will be sharing on how you can provide better citizen experiences and services through richer data insights. Not forgetting, we have more quizzes and prizes up for grabs, so please make sure you join all of us tomorrow. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the first day of Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you have found the sessions really, really insightful. Once again, a big thank you to all of our partners for their support in the Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021. Thank you, Enfrasys, Hewlett, Packard Enterprise, Commvault, and Perjasa. We look forward, ladies and gentlemen, to see you again tomorrow at day 2 of the Bersama Malaysia Summit 2021. I'm Sophia signing off. See you tomorrow. Take care and have a good day.